Okay, Matt, it's time for us to begin this evening. Thanks for coming.
Well, happy to be here. And I'm glad that all the rest of you are here as well.
Yes, thank you all for joining us this evening. Oh, sorry. My volume's not turned down. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Hey, if you're watching us, please, well, if you're watching us, you're watching.
Yes.
Would you?
Everybody except Josh and Chris.
That's right. Everybody except Josh and Chris and Isaac. Let us know that you're watching and let us know where you're watching from. You know, a couple of days later after we did last week's show, somebody logged on, they watched it, and they said, I'm watching from Bowling Green.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so
I appreciated that.
Yeah, so let us know that you're watching. Let us know where you're watching from. If you're not one of our members, let us know where you're watching from. We would greatly appreciate that. And early in our show, Matt, we're going to bring back everyone's favorite, the roll call.
That's right.
And so if you want to hear your name, then you need to tell us.
Yes, if
you're
you want
watching.
your brief time in the spotlight, now is your opportunity.
That's right. Also, please hit that share button. Let people know what you're doing this evening and the kind of Bible-based teaching that they can expect here at the Jackson Heights Church of Christ. I love teaching the Bible. I know Matt does too.
Absolutely.
And we just want to share it with everybody. So let folks know what you're watching, what you're doing this evening, and we will commence into our study.
That we will.
This is, I guess, our third installment in the book of Esther. Tonight, we plan to go through chapters 4, 5, and 6. Hopefully, we won't get bogged down too much, but we'll get there. So, Matt, real quick, give us an update on what's been going on in the book of Esther since we last talked. Give us the recap of chapters 1, 2, and 3.
Recap is that the Persian king Ahasuerus fires his queen, ultimately settles upon Esther, who is a young Jewish woman, as the queen's replacement.
Okay.
Esther has an uncle, Mordecai, who is concerned about her welfare. And in the course of looking after her, gets into a dispute with a Persian bigwig named Haman.
Okay.
And Haman gets so mad at him and realizes that he is a Jew that he asks the king and gets permission to exterminate the entire Jewish race in about a year.
Okay. And the decree then gets issued, and Mordecai and Haman go off to feast. And that last statement at the end of chapter 3, why don't you set the scene as we roll into chapter 4 by reading the last few words there of chapter 3.
The couriers left, spurred on by royal command. These are the guys who are carrying the edict of extermination.
The original postal service.
Yes. And the law was issued in the fortress of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, while the city of Susa was in confusion.
Okay, so the city is thrown into utter confusion because this decree to exterminate the Jews has been issued. I think it's presumably a very large Jewish population in Susa.
Well, it's the capital of the whole empire. You would expect there to be Jews there.
That's right. There's a lot there. And so that brings us into chapter 4. And in chapter 4, we get the big statement. We'll get to verse 14 in just a moment. But I want to ask a question. So give me your responses. You can text it to me or make a comment. What is it about verse 14 that makes it so popular? What is it that you love about verse 14? And how does it motivate you to reach out and try to capture your own higher calling in living? Can I say it that way, Matt? So y'all let me know that while we talk through, and when we get to verse 14, we'll come back with everybody's responses. All right, give us the highlights as we kind of work our way through chapter 4. Mordecai is a man in the know.
Yes.
And so he finds out what's going on. And this doesn't make him happy. In fact, he puts on sackcloth and ashes and goes and sits at the gate.
Well, he gets as close as he can.
That's right.
He can't actually enter the gate. But he is lamenting and mourning and just carrying on.
Yeah, verse 3 says that Mordecai is not alone. Jews all over were fasting and weeping and lamenting, and many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. And so this kind of sets the scene then for Mordecai's interaction with Esther.
Yep.
Okay. So kind of take us through verses 4 through 11. What's going on there?
This is how Esther learns the bad news.
Okay.
Because she can't see Mordecai because he's not even inside the royal courtyard at
That's
this
right.
point.
And she's contained in the harem.
Yep. So she's locked away. But her servants tell her, your uncle, he's acting kind of funny.
Yeah.
And so she is really upset about this, sends him clothes to put on instead of sackcloth. He won't do it. And so she sends one of her eunuchs out to get the story from him. And the eunuch gets a copy of the decree and goes and takes that into Esther. And Mordecai pleads with Esther, Esther, you need to talk to the king. You need to get this get us out from under this. You're our only hope, basically.
Okay. And so about verse 11 is her reply.
That's it.
Yeah. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law, to be put to death, except to the one whom the king holds out the golden scepter, so that he may live. But as for me, I've not been called to come into the king these 30 days. Wow.
So, Mordecai has got all of his hope invested in Esther.
Right.
Esther is the ace in the hole.
Right.
But instead of being willing to try and get the whole Jewish nation out of this mess,
Right.
Instead, what happens is she basically says no. And this is right in line with what we've seen from Esther so far. This is a very passive young woman. And as we discussed last time, it may well simply be because she's very young and she's not very self-confident.
That's right. And really, everything's going to change in these first two, in chapters 5 and 6.
Yes.
In 4 and 5. Everything changes about her. She is going to be passive. We'll see her become more assertive. Just a real quick question. Then after this, I want to let Matt answer this question, and then I'll do the roll call before we get to verse 12. Do you think Mordecai realizes it's his fault that the Jews are being annihilated?
I think that is probably true. It's obvious there are not very many secrets in the palace compound.
Right.
And Mordecai knows that he got crossways with Haman. And this is obviously something that is being done by Haman. So you don't have to be real bright to add up 2 plus 2 and get 4. And
Right.
Mordecai realizes, I've just got my whole nation in trouble by not bowing before Haman.
That's right. And for whatever reason, he wouldn't bow down. He doesn't. And I think you're right. I think perhaps there is a realization, I've got to make this right. Now, with that said, when you get into chapter 5, he gets a chance to redeem himself before Haman. And instead of not bowing down, he will not rise up or tremble before Haman as they pass each other in the, or as Haman passes through the gate. So he's still sticking to his guns for whatever reason.
He's a stubborn dude.
That's right. Okay, in a minute, we're going to get to verses 12 through 17, the end of the chapter, the one that contains the big verse that everybody loves. Let me know, what is it about verse 14? Just to recap, in case you don't recall. Mordecai says, for if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise from the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? It's one of the most popular, it is the most popular verse from this book, and perhaps for some, the most popular verse in the Bible.
I have a friend who wrote a hymn about that verse.
Really?
Called For Such a Time as This.
Are we going to sing it soon?
I don't know that it's all the way done yet, but maybe one of these days.
All right. So tell me, or tell us, what is it about this verse that attracts you to it? And how does it motivate you to kind of reach up to a higher calling in your life? Okay. Everybody's favorite. Oh, you know what? Now it's showing me that there's 13 people watching, but it doesn't say who they are. If I miss your name, I'm sorry. It's consolidated some of this stuff. We have the both of us are watching, and Carolyn Stacy and Debbie Clifford and Shirley Fox and Lauren Bassford. Y'all behave. She says y'all behave.
Not likely.
Yeah. Lynn's watching, and the whole family, she says. That's right. She said, if you don't watch, you get a whooping.
No doubt.
Jane's watching. Hey, Janie, we miss you. I hope you're doing well. Debbie, my mom's watching. Ashley's watching. Kristen says that Chloe both wants us to say she is watching.
Hi, Chloe. We
Thank you
appreciate
for watching. Let's see. Stephanie Mullinex is watching. Dennis Pickering is watching. Tammy is watching. Jeff, Madeline, and I are watching. Hello, fam, she says. Hey, guys, I hope y'all are well. Rachel is watching. Sandra Morton is watching. Margaret and Rufus are present and ready for service. And I did get one text, and Larry and Linda are watching.
Good.
So thank y'all for watching. We really appreciated it. We still do appreciate it. We really appreciate it. You know, this was a great experiment that we just kind of threw together at the last minute.
Yeah.
Many months ago, and we're going on almost a year now.
Yeah, off and on.
With a couple of months there in the summer. And it really is a humbling thing when after a few days, you still get people letting you know they're watching them. And you see 300 or 400 or 500 people have watched it.
Yeah.
It really is a humbling thing. And so thank you all very much for your support. Oh, and Jack is with us as well. And my own daughter has weighed in and she says, we are watching.
Well, that's good.
Yep. Okay. I'm glad. Thank y'all. Okay. Matt, take us to verse 12 and to the end of the chapter.
All right. I'll just read it.
Okay.
Esther's response was reported to Mordecai. Mordecai told the messenger to reply to Esther.
So her response is, I might die if I go before the king.
Yeah. I think her response is actually no.
Yeah,
but
no.
like women do a lot of the time. She just gives the reason instead of the answer. But anyway, Mordecai told the messenger to reply to Esther, don't think that you will escape the fate of all the Jews because you are in the king's palace. If you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come to the Jewish people from another place, but you and your father's family will be destroyed. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go and assemble all the Jews who can be found in Susa and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my female servants will also fast in the same way. After that, I will go to the king, even if it is against the law. If I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went and did everything Esther had commanded him.
Okay, boy, there's a lot going on here. Let's see if we can get through it. What do you take from what Mordecai says to her?
I think, first of all, Mordecai is pulling out all the stops, that it is really important to him that she go before the king and that she try to rescue the Jewish nation.
All right. So
he's playing kind of dirty here.
He is playing kind of dirty. How does he play dirty, Matt? That sounded so made up.
Yeah,
we did not rehearse that.
We'll pass right over that. But what she's concerned about is herself. She's worried that if she goes before the king, then she's going to die because he's not going to extend the scepter to her, and it's going to be curtains for Esther.
Right. So she's afraid about dying.
Yes.
And so what does Mordecai tell her?
He tells her, you are going to die.
Yeah. In fact, he does it twice.
Yes.
Look at verse 12.
Verse 13.
13, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
it's that newfangled Bible I got.
Yep. Little numbers. Don't think that you're going to escape.
Right.
This is coming for you too.
Right.
And verse 14, you and your father's family will be destroyed.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, twice he says, you think you're going to die if you go? You're going to die if you don't. And, you know, when I was kind of reading over and thinking over that today, I couldn't help but think about Paul's letter to Philemon. Now, we're going to get to it later in the Bible reading. It's a reading for just one day. But Philemon has a slave, Onesimus. And Paul says, look, I'm going to send you back and I want you to free him. I'm going to come see you in a few weeks.
Yes.
Have that bed ready for me. I know you're going to do the right thing.
And I could compel you.
I could, but
I'm just going to ask nicely.
That's right. Yeah. You know, basically, Mordecai here, like you said, is pulling out all the stops. Woman, you are going to die. And that's a pretty compelling reason to do something, isn't it?
It is, especially if she is describing self-preservation as her motivation.
Right.
And there might be another aspect to this as well, depending on how you read the first part of verse 14.
Okay. So let's go ahead and just take verse 14 as it reads in most every translation. And so he says, look, if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise from the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house are going to perish. So he's saying, look, if you don't act, at least as it's written, translated here in the ESV, somebody else is going to save us, but you will die.
Yep.
And then we have the famous line, and who knows whether you've not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. What do you take from that question? And then I need to read at least one reviewer response that we have.
I think that the question is about as close as you come in the book of Esther to expressing a view of providence.
Okay.
That something is, or someone is directing events.
Right.
So that here Esther is in this position so that she can intervene in a unique way.
That's right. So there is he's expressing a view of providence. Now,
yes.
we see providence in chapter 6, even though the people who are interacting as part of God's providential plan don't realize what's going on.
And, in the case of Ahasuerus, I don't even believe in God.
Probably not. Okay, real quick. Ashley says one of the reasons she likes verse 14 is even when something bad is going on, God may be using it to bring about his will. Romans 8:28.
Sure.
Plays right into that. Lauren says, thinking about God using a situation we're in for his purposes helps us serve his purposes better. I like that. I like that a lot.
I think that's fair.
Oh, well, you better think it is.
Yeah, otherwise I'll have a long talk when I get home.
That's right.
Can't hang my wife out to dry.
Yeah, I mean, I like those. Let me know, what is it about verse 14 that makes it so popular, in your opinion? And what is it that this verse does for you to help you capture your purpose of a higher calling? And I'll come back around to a few of those here in just a minute. Okay, let's take just real quick, though, since we've gotten through verse 14. There is a minority reading for verse 14.
There is.
And Matt, you want to tell us real quick, what is that minority reading?
Basically, the question is whether the first half of verse 14 is a statement or itself is a question.
That's right. So the statement is, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from some other place or some other quarter.
Yes.
All right. So there's a minority reading that moves the word will and kind of puts it in the front, which makes it a rhetorical question.
Yes.
So the rhetorical question then is, if you don't act, will relief and deliverance come from somewhere else?
Basically, if you don't do this, then who is?
That's right. Yeah. So, help us, Queen Esther, you're our only hope, is basically the idea.
Yes.
And this is a minority reading. You find it in a few translations. The Old American Standard puts it like that. The King James, in its convoluted reading, alludes to that. I think the RSV.
I didn't see it in RSV.
Okay, it's one of those older of that translation family.
Yeah, probably just the RV.
RV, thank you. I think the Jerusalem Bible. I forget the JS or JB. Anyway, it does it. It's more of a
Catholic reading.
Yeah. You will find that. So I just want to bring that up because if you start doing some digging, you will find that. I think the NET in its notes for verse 14 brings this up as well. That minority reading of this does exist.
By the way, just since you mentioned it, for those of you who don't have one, the NET or the Net Bible is a really interesting Bible help.
Yeah.
Because it has the most extensive translator's notes of any translation that I'm aware of.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you really want to get into the weeds on alternate readings of passages, the Net Bible is a great resource.
Oh, it is. It's free. It's net.bible.org, net.bible.org. And it is a great resource
And if you like paper, then you can buy a paper version too, which is what I've got.
How thick is that thing? Because of the oh yeah, it's huge because of the notes. My dad has it on a tablet, and usually he'll text me sometimes after we're done saying, "Well, the Net Bible and its translation notes said." I just let that hang there.
Yeah, I actually like the notes better than the translation.
Yeah. Okay, but we're getting a little far afield there. But just to let you know that there is that alternate reading. Okay, so then she says, and this is the great change in Esther. This is where we see passive Esther become assertive Esther.
Yes.
In fact, I just got a text a minute ago and said, in verses 4 through 11, Esther's finally standing up to Mordecai.
That's fair.
And now not only is she standing up, she's actually telling him what to do. This is the great shift and the change of Esther. She has accepted the challenge to go before the king, because I might die if I go. I'm surely going to die if I don't.
Yep.
So my only chance then is to go. So to prepare for that, what does she tell everybody to do? Let's see, that's verse 16.
She wants Mordecai to put all the Jews in Susa to fasting.
Okay.
Which is, again, one of those places in Esther where you expect something else and don't get it.
That's right. Now just keep reading. Not only is this just a fast, but this is one of the great fasts.
Yeah, this is for 3 days.
Yeah, 3 days, no food and no drink. For 3 days and nights. And she says, I and my young women, so my maids in attendance, will also fast as you do. Then I will go before the king. And we'll just finish it out. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. Well, that's a big statement.
Yeah.
So Esther goes from being this passive person to now we will see her in the assertive role, telling Mordecai what to do.
Yeah, before she wanted him to take off the sackcloth and he wouldn't do it.
That's
but now he is doing everything that she wants him to.
That's right, because she has agreed to his plan to go and save the people. Okay, this is one of those really, really strange places. How many times have we said it in our introduction, and we said it last week, and we'll say it this time for the first time tonight? God's not mentioned in this book.
Yes.
The law is not mentioned. Jerusalem, the temple, everything. None of that's mentioned. Prayer is not mentioned. And we would expect to see prayer coupled with this fasting.
Absolutely you would.
But we don't.
I mean, just imagine a conversation like this playing out in our congregation.
Right.
If you are going to ask somebody to go off and X for you,
Yeah.
you're going to go off and pray for me.
Yeah.
Get God in on this.
Yeah, we would never ask anybody to fast for us.
Not in America.
Not in America. Not in America.
That's right.
We don't do that. But yeah, I mean, we would expect that. Don't laugh. Your wife said behave. We would expect prayer to be coupled with that, and we don't have it. But there's also, I think, though, there is something much bigger going on here that, to me, raises a bigger question. The last time signature that we have is all the way back in chapter 3, and it's verse 12. So the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and an edict, according to all that Haman commanded, was written to the king's satraps and the governors and all the providences. And then we get some details about all that. And then the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. And then we get into chapter 4, and it seems to me like it's a continuation of the confusion where Mordecai's in the know, he knows everything, and now he's going to go find out what's going on. This is the 13th day of the first month. Matt, what happens on the 15th day of the first month in the Jewish calendar?
That would be Passover.
That would be Passover. So if this is the same day, or maybe even the next day, the Jews are going to be fasting during the great celebration of Passover, which commemorates their deliverance from
a foreign power.
From a foreign power who wanted to annihilate them.
Yeah, and not that would have any relevance here.
I'm going to tell you, to me, that's one of those places where I'm like, wow.
It is a great big old dog that ain't barking.
Right. Yeah. To me, that is a very strange thing to read that. Y'all go fast during Passover, and at least the first day or maybe even 2 days into the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Yes.
And I'm going to do the same thing. So this is a book about fasting's all over this book. This book ends with a great details about fasting and how we should never let it fall out of our celebration calendar. And yet, the great feast that God commanded that deals with what they're dealing with
is nowhere to be seen.
And we're even fasting. And it's one of those things where I know God's not mentioned, but if we'll take our cues from what is mentioned, a lot of things kind of begin. You kind of see a lot of things real quick. Okay, I've ignored a few people, and we need to do a couple of questions.
Let us not ignore the people.
That's right. Let's see. Is prayer implied? What good is a bunch of hungry Jews? And that's actually from that's Carolyn. She's reading Nathan Ward's book on Esther, and I've heard him say that in his lessons on Esther. Isn't prayer implied? What good is a bunch of hungry Jews?
All I can say is that fasting and prayer is that's a very common scriptural couplet. For instance, I know this is New Testament, but in Acts 13, talking about preparing Barnabas and Paul for the first missionary journey, in verse 3, it's then after they had fasted, prayed, and laid hands on them, they sent them off.
Right.
So, fasting and prayer, I mean, it's like eggs and bacon.
Right. That's right.
Although not if you're a Jew, I guess.
That was wrong. Yeah, I to Carolyn's point,
it's like lamb and matzo.
Lamb and matzo. I can think of plenty of places where prayer is just mentioned by itself. I cannot think of anywhere where fasting is mentioned by itself.
Or at least not in the context of a religious
observance. The Day of Atonement and those instructions, might be by itself, but it's
told
implied.
to afflict themselves before they go into the tabernacle and offer all these sacrifices.
That's right. So to Carolyn's point, I guess we should read it that way. I don't know any other way to read it, that prayer is implied. Now, when you get to Apocryphal Esther, you don't have to assume it. We actually get the prayers.
No, they were helpfully
Esther.
supplied.
Oh, yes. Yes, we know exactly what they're saying in Apocryphal Esther. So then the question comes up, if it's implied, why don't we just put it there? And again, I guess it kind of goes back to what do we view as the main purpose of this book? And as I read it, I see if not the main purpose, but one of the main purposes is to show how even though God's people were not very godly, maybe even ungodly, God still used them and still preserved them because he had a bigger plan and a goal.
Yes. And I guess part of the problem, too, if we accept the apparent chronology here, that all this is happening right over the Passover.
Right.
That if you have people who are religious enough to pray, then why aren't they religious enough to celebrate the Passover?
Right.
And think that maybe that might help.
Yeah. Because in some of the readings that I've done on the Second World War, some of the most memorable Passovers by the Jews were done during that time of extermination.
Yes.
That they still kept it.
Yes.
And now I know it was maybe not necessarily an immediate thing, but in some circumstances, but it's still there. And it's an intriguing question. So we'll just put it out there like that. This is a really, really intriguing question.
And if you are committed to the Passover, are you going to not celebrate the Passover because some kid in the palace tells you not to?
Right. And again, this is what makes this book interesting. We've got all these people feasting. But right when they're supposed to be feasting what the Lord said to feast on, they're fasting. Then at the end of the book, we have the establishment of Purim, where they say, don't ever let this fall out of disrepute. Always keep it. And yet we don't even read them keeping the big feast. And then I think there's even another question. What's he doing in Susa anyway? It's Passover. He's supposed to be in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
It was one of the feasts where you were required to present yourself before the Lord. Now, I know the temple's not there, but the altar's still there. And the next time in the historical context that we read about Passover is Ezra 6.
Yeah.
But that's after the temple gets completed. A lot of questions there. Just real quick, I've had a few more people join us, and I just want to acknowledge them. Judy, Leslie, and Lisa are all watching. Barbara Lamastis is watching. Barb Hall is watching. Trudy Higginbotham is watching. And Drew is watching as well. Ashley has a quick question. Was fasting considered a religious practice at the time?
I would say yes. It was definitely coupled with some of the great Jewish feasts.
Yeah.
And
not only in Judaism. The Assyrians are fasting. Fasting is a part of religious duty and service and worship across many religions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, even in the New Testament, we see Christians fasting.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, I think it certainly is.
Okay. So we find then as we enter into chapter 5, Esther is proactive here. And so she starts to prepare for the banquet, and she approaches the king, and you just have to wonder, are her knees shaking? What's going on in her mind as she approaches the king. Now apocryphal Esther tells us that she swoons and faints and cries and does all that. We don't get none of that here. She just bravely goes in as assertive Esther, and she's granted audience, and she invites the king to a banquet, and they go. And then we get to the last part of the chapter. This is kind of where I wanted to be real quick.
Well, one last thing before we hit the last part. It is interesting that at this point, even though she goes to the banquet with Haman, she doesn't spill the beans yet.
That's right. In the first banquet, she doesn't say. She uses her feminine powers of persuasion to say, "Why don't y'all come back the next night, and then I'll tell you."
Come have another feast, guys.
That's right. That's right. Come and have another feast. And so then Haman leaves. We need to get here to verse 9. So Haman leaves and went out that day joyfully and glad of heart. But when he saw Mordecai in the king's gate, he neither rose. So earlier it was he won't bow down in homage. Here, I guess we're supposed to envision Mordecai being seated, and he won't stand up in honor. Nor does he tremble before him. And so Haman was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Nevertheless, he said, "Your day's coming, buddy." And he restrained himself and went home and set before his friends and his wife, Sherish. And Haman recounted to them all the splendor of his riches and all the number of his sons, and told them, "Look how magnificent I am."
Yeah, he calls all of his friends together so he can tell them all about how wonderful
That's right. Okay, here's the question I want everybody to answer. What's Haman's problem? What do you think is Haman's problem? I think I might have had that a little bit more elaborate when I put it out there, but why is it that he acts this way, so angry at Mordecai, but then boasts so much about all that he has? I think we could boil it down to one word, but I want to hear from y'all. What do you think about Mordecai's temper tantrum here, and what's really behind his issues? All right, what things you want to say about? I said Mordecai, I meant Haman. Yeah, what's Haman's problem, not Mordecai?
Well.
What's Haman's problem, Matt?
If I had to pick one word, I would probably pick brat.
Oh, he's a brat?
This is a guy who has never had anything go against him his whole life.
Right.
He's so wealthy and powerful, that he just expects people to follow him around, telling him how wonderful he is.
Right.
And then when there's one guy who won't do that, his tender little ego can't stand up to the challenge.
That's right.
Just diverts his entire life to destroying this guy.
And not just this guy. I mean, he could destroy this guy, but instead of destroying this guy, he wants to destroy this guy's people.
He wants to throw a great big hissy fit.
That's right. Yeah. And go ahead and tell me just real quick, in a word, what do you think is Haman's problem? What's the root of his temper tantrum here, his hatred for Mordecai and the Jews, and his braggadocious way of talking to his friends?
The nice way to say it is that he's very proud.
All right.
He's arrogant.
All right. He's arrogant. He's proud. I've heard it said more than once, pride is the ground in which all other sins grow. And so here we see that he has let it get to him. Carolyn says his problem is being self-centered. He has a huge ego.
Same thing.
Yeah. Real quick though, we mentioned this back, I guess, last week when we talked about Haman and how we thought it was kind of odd that the king would have to command people to bow down to Haman. So I was listening in Genesis today. I listen through the Bible in a year. And when Joseph is made second in command in Egypt, Pharaoh commands everybody to bow down before him. So maybe commanding people to bow down before you isn't as bad as maybe we made it. Because Joseph gets the same treatment. Carolyn also says arrogance is a big issue with him, and most definitely. Matt says, oh, hey, Matt Cason's watching. He says ego is a real problem. Lauren says insecurity is his problem. I think so.
I think that's the flip side of the coin of pride.
Right.
That whenever you have somebody who is just determined to let everybody know how wonderful they are, usually you have somebody who deep down inside does not believe that they are actually very wonderful, and therefore they constantly need confirmation.
That's right. All right. So this section ends then with, let's see, I'll pick it up at about verse 13. He says, yet everything that I have is worth nothing to me so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. I have all this, but this is the one thorn under my saddle. I cannot stand this guy at all. So then his wife and all of his friends say to him, well, let gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. Then go joyfully with the king to the feast. And this idea pleased Haman, and he had gallows made. I've seen that this is probably not gallows like we think of the Old West, hang 'em high gallows, but probably a 50 cubit high impaling stick. So that might be kind of help us understand how they could erect a 50-foot
the Persians
gallows
did a lot of impaling.
Yeah. So that's how they could do that, is quickly, just overnight. Just go find a big tree, cut it down, sharpen the end, and put it up. Carolyn also said, he is so dramatic.
Well, I mean, his life is ruined.
Right.
Because of Mordecai.
But this
is like 14-year-old girl territory.
Yeah. There you go again. You were told to behave. So I think to Carolyn's point, this is a flip side of his insecurity. Got to be so dramatic about everything. Okay. Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is the big turning point in the book, isn't it, Matt?
It is.
We don't see the protagonist there at all, at least in verses 1 through 11.
Nope.
They don't do anything. Esther doesn't do anything in chapter 6. Mordecai doesn't do anything in chapter 6 either. Now, something is done to him, but he doesn't move the storyline along at all. Chapter 6 is all about God's providential hand moving everything. And the entire book turns on the events of chapter 6. So, real quick, as we get into chapter 6 and we look at God's providential hand, here's what I want to know from y'all watching. When have you experienced God's providential hand in your life? When have you experienced God's providential hand in your life? You may not have recognized it at the moment, but you probably did in hindsight. Just real briefly and quickly, give glory to God for something that He did to move in your life and in your world that in hindsight and retrospect, you're like, you know what, that was the providence of God moving in my life. Okay, tell us what's going on in chapter 6.
Well, we have the king and his bout of insomnia.
All right.
So he wants to have the royal records read to him.
Oh, the old congressional record. Who wants to hear that?
Yep, it's like a tranquilizer in book form.
That's right.
And so as he is having it read,
right,
he is reminded of the assassination plot.
That's right.
And he wants
now, the assassination plot, just real quick for everybody that might not have been with us last week. Mordecai, at the end of chapter 2, discovers there's some folks going to assassinate the king. He foils their plot. And then we would expect the very next scene to read, Mordecai is honored.
Mordecai gets stuffed.
But Mordecai, he gets snubbed, and it's actually Haman who gets honored. And so this record is being read about this assassination plot that was foiled by Mordecai. Go ahead.
So, King says, well, we should do something nice for the guy who saved me from the assassin.
Yeah, verse 3. What honor or distinction has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? And the young man that was reading it with that smooth, soft, silky voice to put the king back to sleep.
Like young Barry White here.
That's right. Says
nothing has been done. Couldn't help myself.
Oh, wow.
So nothing has been done.
Nothing has been done. Oh, no. Stop.
Be strong, brother.
So this is a big deal. This is a big deal to the Persians to honor people in very big ways.
You want to like people to tell you about the next assassination plot.
Right. That's right.
This is somebody you want to be seen as honored.
That's right. So he's like, well, we haven't honored him. Well, we need to do something about that. And so they hear somebody out in the court, and King's like, hey, who's out in the court? And Haman had just entered the court, and because he was going to ask the king if he could hang Mordecai on this gallows or impale him.
Both of them are thinking about Mordecai, but in very different ways.
In very different ways. And neither one knows what the other one is thinking. And so Haman comes in, he's standing there, and the king says, what should be done to the man whom the king delights to honor? And so everything that's wrong about Haman suddenly bubbles up to the top, right? The pride, the insecurity, the ego.
He just needs a little bit more.
That's right. What else? Oh, who else would the king want to honor more than me? So he says,
verse 7.
Verse 7. Yeah, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and a horse that the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal crown is set. And let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials. Let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor. Let them lead him on the horse through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. But basically what Haman says is, honor this person as if he is the king. Because I'd like to be king.
This is sort of like Haman applying the golden rule.
That's right. That's right.
Except he thinks he's talking about himself.
That's right. He thinks it's all about him. So he throws it out as lavish as possible. And the king says, hey, that's a great idea. Why don't you call Mordecai and do that for him? Because you are just the perfect noble official to lead Mordecai through the streets.
Yeah, you'll show everybody how honored Mordecai is.
That's right. Yeah. Nobody in the story, none of our protagonists, neither Esther nor Mordecai, are here to change anything. And yet, I think we have a clear picture here of God moving.
Oh, yes.
The king just so happened to not be able to sleep. The smooth talking chamber
attendant.
Attendant, thank you. I was going to say maiden, but I know it was a man. The chamber attendant just so happens to open the chronicles to that particular event. It just so happened that Haman showed up at just the right time. And his ego gets the best of him. His pride
it's reliable.
pushes. That's right. His pride just pushes him forward where he doesn't even need to go. And it just so happens that the king says, that is a fantastic idea. Now I want you to make sure it happens. If God, I know God's not mentioned anywhere, but if we got to see God anywhere, it's right here in this chapter working.
The guy who has purposed to kill all the Jews,
right,
especially Mordecai, is now leading Mordecai around the city square in a subservient position, showing everybody how much the king wants to honor this Jew whom he wants to kill.
That's right.
I can only imagine what tone of voice he must have been using in verse 11.
Give it
this
to
is
us.
what is done for the man the king wants to honor.
Eeyore?
Pretty much.
So we've gone from Barry White to Eeyore. I like your impersonations tonight.
I guess I'm on fire.
Okay. That's Bruce Springsteen. All right, just real quick. Tell me of a time when you saw God's providential hand moving in your life. You may not have seen it in the moment. It might have been in retrospect. But give God glory tonight for something that he's done in your life that you can look back on and say, you know what? That was God moving. I've already got one. Give me a couple of more just real quick. And then let's go ahead and finish out the chapter and then we'll come to our examples. So Mordecai returned to the king's gate after being led around by Eeyore.
I wonder what he was thinking.
I know. Like, what was that? Maybe Mordecai's pinching himself all the way through. Like, am I dreaming? But he returns back to the gate, to his post. Haman hurried to his house, mourning with his head covered. Haman told his wife and all of his friends everything that had happened to him. Then his wise men and his wife Sherish said to him, well, I hate to say this to you, but if Mordecai, whom you have begun to follow, is of the Jewish people, you're going to die. I mean, that's basically
it's going to go poorly.
This is not going to go good for you. And so they just give it to him straight out.
And then it is off to banquet number 2 for him.
Yeah. That's right. Okay, real quick, I'll give a couple examples. I can't tell you how many times God has saved me from car wrecks. I used to commute from McEwen to Columbia. Isaac calls it C State. He says all the kids call it C State now.
Okay.
When I was a kid, it was Columbia State. So I drove 62 miles one way. Yes. And I have fallen asleep on Highway 7 more than once. Found myself on the side of the road. I once passed a car, and the sun was so bright, I did not see the oncoming car, and passed between them. And I think back to, there was a time I was pulling out. Chris will know exactly where this is at. I was coming in from back behind Walmart, going over to the old road there beside the old Coke plant. And I went to turn left, and suddenly a city police car was chasing somebody and just came right through. And I just happened to just catch it right out of the corner of my eye and slam my brakes. You know, I could chalk all that up to my amazing ability to react. But I think it's best to chalk that up to the glory of God, that his hand was on me and protected me and to keep me safe. And that's just where I go with that. Kristen Botha says her providential moment was when her family disowned her.
Ooh.
And there's a long story there. And maybe one day she might share that with folks. But I can see how that would be providential. Let's see. Miss Mountain Lover says, it was God's providential hand that Jason survived his heart attack. That was absolutely shot by the medical staff. They commented to me that there is some there. I'm sorry. They commented to me that There is someone who decided it wasn't his time to go. And how many times could we talk about people making dramatic recoveries from illnesses? My high school friends abandoning me, Lauren says, that led me to change in college, which led to a completely different life. Ray says, not only does God move in providential ways to protect and deliver for good, don't ever forget there is a flip side to that. Oh, that's right. I like that. He also delivered Haman judgment. And so, yeah, this is providentially, this leads to Haman's downfall.
Yes.
And then protection for the Jews. And so, that is certainly all there. Well, that brings us to the end of where I wanted us to get. You think this is a good place to stop?
Well, I suspect so, since we're about out of time.
All right. Thank you all for joining us tonight. For all of you that weighed in, whether through comments or texting me, I better double check and make sure I didn't miss anybody's text messages. Before we go, Matt. Yeah, I got everybody. Give us one last word. Pick one point out of all this. What do you think we need to take away from it?
I think that in addition to everything that we have also already said about God's providence, this is ultimately about God's compassion.
Okay.
That it's not just God's compassion for people who at least are not obviously pious.
Right.
This is about God's compassion for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the Persians go through and exterminate all the Jews, then there is no Jesus. And
that's right.
We are not here, and we are without hope and without God in the world.
That's right.
And yet God is compassionate. And so we need to remember that even if we are not perfect people, even if we have all of these struggles and flaws in our lives, then God will still feel compassion toward us and will still providentially work to help us.
Yeah. You know, all questions aside about the piety of these two, I think what you see here is growth.
Yeah.
I did have one viewer say, I can't believe y'all throwing them under the bus like that. And there's not a lot of good to say about them in the first 3 chapters. It's not till we get here that we actually see them doing great things.
Yes.
And as much as Esther will risk her life, as much as Mordecai is leading the Jews as he has influence, and then we'll see him later with more governmental influence, as much as she does and as much as he does, it really took God to move the needle.
This is not Esther rescuing the Jews. This is not Mordecai rescuing the Jews. This is God.
This is God
rescuing the Jews.
That's right. And we cannot forget that in our lives, whether it's something spiritual or something temporal, we do what we can, and we do it in faith, but we've got to recognize ultimately it will be up to God to work it all for good.
Absolutely.
And we need to give him glory.
And I find that tremendously comforting.
That's right. That right there is a place for hope. Okay. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We will be here in person assemblies Sunday, 10:15
and 5 p.m.
And 5 p.m. You have the AM sermon.
I do.
What you preaching on?
AM sermon is "Let There Be Light" in the sense of wisdom overcoming folly.
All right.
Following up on your sermon from last Sunday.
That's right. Wisdom over folly. Taking that light and dark contrast from Genesis 1 and 3. Let's see. I plan to preach on James chapter 1, verses 19 through 21. Be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. And I forget what the next words say. Put away wrath and malice and receive the implanted word of God. There we go.
Which will save your souls.
Which will save your souls. And so we're going to take those, I think that's verses 19 and 20. Anyway, we're going to take those 2 verses and work through that. We're trying to take our Sunday night sermons from the readings. So hopefully we can kind of keep a pretty regular, steady diet of that. And so that will be this PM sermon. We would love to see you. hopefully, if you can join us live in person, we have COVID protocols, mask and social distancing, and please use the hand sanitizer and whatnot.
Yep.
But
As far as I know, in the past year, there has been no one who has gotten COVID in our assemblies.
that's right, and that is something to be thankful for, and we are very, very thankful.
This is true.
Yeah, it certainly is. So if you can join us in person, we would love that. If not, the live streams, Lord willing, will be up and running both on Facebook and YouTube, and you can join us that way. Again, let us know who's watching. Let us know where you're watching from. We would love to be able to tell you personally, thank you. Thank you very much for watching us tonight, and God bless.